Cool. Hi, folks. We are a little bit late. I apologize for that. But you know what? The wizard arrives exactly when they're supposed to. So here we are. Um, Welcome to the V Brown Bag. I am Damian Carlson. My guest this evening is Mike Fiedler from the Python Software Foundation. He'll be talking to us about increasing confidence in your software supply chain. Before we get to that, just a few show notes. You can follow us online. We're on all the cool platforms, even the one that I love to dead name by calling it Twitter. We're there, just not as often because it's not fun. But you can also find us on Blue Sky. We're at vbrownbag.com on Blue Sky. I am at 6foot.dad at Blue Sky. Chris may be joining us this evening. Work things, work happens. So we'd love for you to follow us on YouTube, to join us, to be a part of the conversation. We do this for free because we'd like to give back to the community. And so I hope this content is meaningful to you. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to get rid of this. Mr. Mike, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Damian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the show and for joining at the last minute because we did not do a good job with the logistics.
It's totally fine. Calendaring is hard. Time is hard. We all have real jobs that we are trying to do good at. So when it comes to extracurricular, I get it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Chris actually had scheduled this. I think he created it sometime back in February and got it wrong. And I realized, I think it was last night, I said, oh, we haven't done the promos for this thing this week. And so I'm like, where is all this stuff? Where's our promo card? Where's our StreamYard link? So yes. Anyways, this is the life that we choose and we love it. So
hey, I feel bad because I was not promoted all week, and that's okay.
Oh man, I apologize. Well, now's your chance. Please, you have the stage. Tell us about yourself, Mr. Mike.
Well, my name is Mike. I work for the Python Software Foundation, which is a nonprofit that is charged with the mission of making the Python language and ecosystem, approachable, inclusive, and good for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that for a couple of years. I've been working at startups and mid-size and enterprise companies for almost 30. So I've had a lot of variety of experience. And for the last couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to get paid full-time to work on open source software, specifically the foundation of all Python installable packages that are kind of public on the internet from pypi.org. That's PyPI, YPI, as opposed to what many folks mistakenly call it, which is PyPI, because PyPI is PYPY, and that's an entirely different project. That is the Python runtime built in Python, as opposed to the main Python runtime that most of us use, which is CPython. So PyPI is distinct from PyPI. And I work on PyPI, make no mistake. Everyone gets it wrong. There's a pronunciation guide on the website. It's fine.
I actually didn't even know that PYPY was a thing. So I've learned. I'm also curious if there's a PIPI.
Yes, I believe there is a project called PIPI.
Awesome. Well, why
we did this to ourselves. Why not?
Yeah, this is the life we chose. Awesome. How long have you been with the Software Foundation?
So I joined full-time as an employee about a year and a half ago. And this is being recorded in the week before PyCon US, which is the kind of really big conference here in the United States. And I attended my first one when I was still just a maintainer, when I wasn't working for the foundation. I got into this work about 4 years ago or so when I was, transitioning into management positions, more often than not. And I've always taken my management roles as an opportunity to spend more time on open source, because that's where I can kind of keep my technical skills sharp. And that's kind of the fun stuff, right? Writing code. And, as many of us can and should is, as you go throughout your career, you should try taking, if you're an individual contributor and engineer, you should try taking on a role in leadership or management. And then if you like it, continue pursue it. It's a very different career. It's related, but it's different. And if you like it, stick with it. And if not, swing back. It's okay, right? Like our industry is forgiving enough that it allows us some of this mobility. But while you're kind of making the choices, keeping an eye on what is developing in other arenas is very important. So that's why I kept working on open source. And one of the meteor projects that I was using was PyPI.org, and I wanted a feature on the website. Specifically, when you visit PyPI.org, there's a big search bar, nice juicy search bar in the middle of the page. Mm-hmm. And there's a very good reason why it doesn't autofocus search. Autofocusing on a search bar is somewhat aggressive towards accessibility readers. So that's not a good experience when you visit a web page and suddenly the cursor or their reader will jump to the middle of the page. So it loses a lot of context. So we disallowed doing an autofocus, but I still wanted to kind of be able to quickly jump to that. So my first contribution to PyPI was writing JavaScript for the website, not even in Python, not in anything else, but JavaScript to kind of use a keyboard to jump over to. So if you hit the slash key on your keyboard on PyPI.org, it'll focus on the search bar.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. It needs a little visibility. Like I need to figure out how to do some CSS stuff in the search bar to say, slash to focus or something. Yeah. But it was the first thing that I wanted. And because it was available, it was accessible. The maintainers were very welcoming and said, what else do you want to poke at? And kind of lured me in. And after a while, I had been working on this as kind of my pet open source project significantly. They invited me in to maintain it more diligently. And after a while, a role opened up to work on security for this platform. And I interviewed along with many other folks and got the gig. And I've been doing that and trying to talk about it and promote what we're doing there as a way to get the message out around software supply chain security.
Yeah. I think I feel like over the past few years, that concept has made itself more present. I mean, even in the news, right? And so, yeah, I think those of us who are either software developers or developer adjacent, like myself, right? We're aware of it, right? Like we know about Dependabot on GitHub, we know about this and that, right? Those kind of upstream libraries that you might include that you don't even really think about making sure they're not, mining for Bitcoin on your computer, right? It's not something that everyone thinks about or, has any desire to maintain. So yeah, that's a very good thing that you're doing that, because if I'm drawing stupid things with Turtle, I want it to only be doing that and not because of some software supply chain thing.
Yeah, I mean the topic has gotten kind of very much in the media's news, right? Like there have been a notable vulnerabilities in software. Like if you rewind the clock about 10 years to Heartbleed, I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
But for the folks unfamiliar, it was some code that was introduced very correctly, or the way you should. Somebody sent a patch, and the underlying OpenSSL library was working just fine. But if you asked for a request in a very particular manner, you could get a lot of other security conscious stuff, such as the private keys of the server sending it to you, and then you could start decrypting more things. And it was like, well, this is a problem. So the world exploded and everybody patched as soon as they could. And then we hear about others like Log4j, which again, that was just people trying to do the right thing, and it just didn't work out. And then you get into some of the more nefarious ones, right? Like the SolarWinds hack. For the folks who aren't familiar with that one, was the attackers gained access to the build farm that's building these monitoring or agents that get deployed to endpoints on millions of devices around the world. And once you're kind of in the supply chain, like it's really hard to detect that unless you have other mitigating factors looking for that. And then we get into like XZ utils, which folks may have heard about, where this is a compression library, which is kind of foundational to most protocols and interaction models, because we all want to compress the data before we send it over a wire. So that way it's kind of fewer bytes and we have these big, powerful CPUs. And an attacker or a group of attackers, it's still unproven, were able to become open source maintainers over the course of 2 years to slowly introduce these small changes that build up over time that basically, if this would have gotten out widely, more widely than it did, would have created an SSH backdoor reverse shell on every SSH server that ran it, which means that as that server fires up, it's phoning home somewhere to someone else who can phone back in and do whatever they want on that server. And it's like, that's pretty nefarious. But that was caught, again, because the code is open source. So it's like, it's both a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's open source, anybody can write it, but it's open source, anybody can look at it.
Right.
So I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that regard, but it's a double-edged sword that you get for free. So that's an important aspect, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's for free. Don't cut yourself.
Don't cut yourself.
Yeah. That XC thing is, I remember hearing about that. It didn't immediately jump into my mind when you first mentioned it, but as you were describing it, I remembered reading an article about that. That was pretty freaking brilliant, man. I wonder what the end game was. I mean, probably just, I don't know, ransomware or something, but still, like something boring like that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a 2-year investment, right? Like that's significant time and effort to kind of make this thing happen. And like we've seen a fair amount of like interest in how do we prevent something like that happening again? How do we provide support to different maintainers? And there's a bunch of different programs, but a lot of them come down to like give money, right? And who do you do? It's you give them to the foundations who are experts in how to do this. Giving money is often a proxy for giving time, right? But it's rare that an organization is large enough and self-sufficient enough that they are going to dedicate full-time humans on staff to work on things that don't necessarily make them a profit. That's not to say there aren't. There are many organizations, you know, the big corporations have a bunch of these folk doing that full-time, which is great. And I appreciate that. But I also know that if cost cutting comes, you know, these are some of the folks who may go earlier than others because they don't drive revenue, very clearly attributable revenue. So if you can afford it, throw money to, you know, Python Software Foundation, Alpha Omega, OpenSSF, the Linux Foundation. All of these are really good foundations that know how to kind of make use of these funds and turn them into good things, myself included, right? I'm on a grant. And if you don't want to do a foundation, there's also something called the Open Source Pledge, where some companies, and this is being led by Sentry, who basically said, we consume so much open source, we even produce open source, we should try and give back money where we can. So they have a pledge to allocate, I think, something on the order of $2,000 per full-time developer towards an open source donation. So check out, opensourcepledge.org for kind of how you can help out in one of those ways. And check out the Python Software Foundation at python.org. We've got a PSF landing page and talks about how to kind of help there.
I did not know about the open source pledge. The company that I work for sells an enterprise product that is built on OpenStack, right? It's not open source, right? Which exists, right? Like I have talked to the folks at the Open Infra Foundation. they're like, this is what makes the world go round, right? It takes a lot of folks to make a world, right? Not everyone can do, you know, not every company uses open source software the same way. And so I was not aware about the open source pledge. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah. It's yet another idea, which I hope it grows and kind of takes foot.
Yeah.
But again, the best thing you can do is give money to the people who know how to turn that money into something. But again, money is a proxy for time and effort. So if you can dedicate the time and effort, please do so. But if you can't, then give money.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's just like anything else.
Yep. Absolutely.
So did you have a kind of talk track that you wanted to go through, or what did you have in mind?
I put together some slides, you know, pretty quickly. So hopefully they make sense, but they're just kind of like discussion points, and we can have something on the screen to talk about. You know, I put these together again based on our talk today. So that's a picture of me in you know, PyCon 2023 on the rooftop of a hotel in Salt Lake City. It was just a beautiful kind of look. I really enjoyed being there. So I figured that's a good photo. I'm at Mike the Man on most platforms, and I often call myself a code gardener because I like pulling the weeds. I like kind of creating a fertile area for things to grow where I might not be writing them myself. Other people might write them, but I've made the conditions such that it can be done. I maintain PyPI.org, and that's fun. There's only a few of us, and the existence of PyPI is amazing. It's been around for 20 years in some form or another. The most recent form has been around since about 2018, and we've been evolving it since. But it's largely a volunteer-driven effort. I'm the first person who's been hired full-time, not like contracted to execute something. I'm the only full-timer. We now, as of last year, have a full-time support specialist, which is excellent. And we have some partial effort from some other engineers at the foundation who work on infrastructure and other parts of the Python ecosystem. I'm also an AWS container hero. That's a honor that I share with Chris Williams, who's not here right now. But we are AWS heroes, a group of about 250 of us worldwide who have been recognized by AWS as civilians who don't work there, who know a thing or two about AWS and are happy to talk to AWS and kind of cut through lots of layers of bureaucracy and kind of give them the unvarnished opinion. And I'm also a roller derby referee. That's another thing I do for fun. I volunteer a lot of my time away. And I've been doing that for about 17 years and have traveled to a bunch of different places as a result, met some really awesome people around the world. That's a little bit about me. That's probably more about me than you need to know right now.
I was actually wondering what the coolest roller derby participant name was that like immediately jumps to mind.
It's such a hard one.
Yeah.
There was a player here a long time ago who was Beyond Slay in New York, and she was awesome, and she was just an all-star player. But I go by Ref in Peace. We all have fun names, and it's part of the deal.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But to talk about software and supply chain stuff, I thought, let's talk about kind of two buckets of people, the consumers and producers. So Damien, where do you think you fall on this equation?
Mostly a software consumer.
But also your company is a software producer.
Yes, and I do contribute in some way to some of those repos, but vast majority of my time is consuming.
Yeah, which again, that's very much the kind of imbalance here. Harvard Business School did a study in 2022. They published it or something like that, where they talked about kind of the economy of open source software, how if every producer of software had to rewrite all of the software that they use, it would cost like $4 to $5 billion US, their estimate. But the flip side is on the consumer side, if everyone had to pay a license fee for all of the software you consume, the open source free software, if you had to pay that, they estimate that based on the estimate for, all the different numbers that they use, they estimate that would have cost around 8 to 10 trillion US dollars.
Wow.
So we're all getting
crazy.
this for free.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some way, right? Like even if you're using VS Code, that's still open source software, right? So yeah, that's that's wild.
Which you got for free. You didn't pay a dime for that, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So there's very much an imbalance. The consumers are there. So I'd say as a consumer, always say thank you to your producers, right? You got something for free. There are lots of people who will open up a GitHub issue and come out hot and be like, this needs to be fixed immediately. It's like, well, who the hell are you, right?
Right.
So, it's just something to be cognizant of. Most of us are software consumers. Like the machines we're talking to each other on, all of this is software that is using open source in some fashion. Mm-hmm. And 9 times out of 10, somewhere in their stack is Python. So like we're everywhere. JavaScript is everywhere. There's just ubiquity in these software libraries and packages at this point, because it's just too costly to write everything yourself. Yourself. So I wanted to kind of explore some behaviors or characteristics that I think as a software consumer, you probably want to do. And we'll talk through some of these things. So, as a consumer, you have code, you are writing code, you're consuming code, and you're usually kind of including it into something yourself. So first thing you want to do is just remove unused code, right? If you're not using it, if this doesn't need to be there, delete it. There are so many times you'll come across a software function that was like written 20 years ago by a guy named Dave, and it was never executed. It has no reason to be there. That said, don't just go after your code base with like an axe, right? It does require some surgery, but there's tools in almost every language to help identify unused code. Some IDEs or code editors will highlight unreachable code. So if like you wrote a return statement and then you wrote some more code after that return statement that's still part of the function, you're never going to hit that code because you've already returned.
Right.
So, identifying unused code reduces the amount of software you have to worry about. And if you use test code coverage reporting, you can always look at what code is not being tested and see, should that code be tested or should that code be removed? Those are 2 really good ways to up your code coverage: is add more tests or delete the code, and then you have fewer things to cover. Imports, this is something that can easily grow out of control, and like there are tools that help here as well. And like in Python land, Flake 8 will identify if you've imported a module or a package and you didn't use it later on. Sometimes that's very important to do. In Python land, package imports should have no side effects, even though some do, but they should be clean imports. So if you imported something and you didn't use it, you can probably think about removing it. And the same thing applies to unused dependencies. And this is where we get into supply chain stuff, right? So all software is built up of a chain of dependencies. So if you depend on project A, it depends on project B, and project B depends on project C. If you don't even need A, you can probably remove it from your stack, and then you don't have B or C either. So, looking at what is actually live helps reduce the overall scope of what you have to worry about.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that's a lot of like removing, right? I do love, again, this is my code gardener instinct, right? Pulling weeds. That's what I see these are. And if you pull enough weeds, then everything else can grow better. And kind of in the tranche of, okay, let's say I've removed all the extraneous code, all the imports, all the dependencies that I don't need. And the reason, by the way, that I ordered them that way is as you're deleting code, you can often see, oh, I imported that to be used in that code. And then I'm not using that import anymore. So you can delete the import. And it's like, wait, if I'm not using that import from that third-party library anymore, maybe I don't need that dependency anymore. So it's kind of progressive and they stack up on each other and it's super helpful. Unused dependencies are like one of the top 20 things that you get dinged on security audits. It's like, why do you have this vulnerable dependency in your stack? And it's like, oh, we don't even use it. Well, then get rid of it.
Right.
So once you've kind of cleaned up, then it comes time to like ratchet things down. So audit your dependencies. This is another kind of gardening metaphor. I do like the notion of organic or farm to table software, right? If you just go to a package registry and download a package without kind of looking at it, you're kind of picking something off of a supermarket shelf, not even looking at the ingredients, and saying, you know what, I'm happy to eat this, right?
Yeah.
I haven't tasted it, I haven't evaluated its nutritional value. I'm just going to put it in my next dish. And that's not always a recipe for success. A better way is to say, what is this? So take an interest to kind of what your dependencies are and like who's using them? Who else is using these? It can sometimes be a little hard to nail those specifics down, but there are other tools like ecosystems, which is ecosystem.syste.ms, deps.dev, and a slew of other kind of auditing and scoring tools out there that, again, choose your poison of who you trust or audit them yourself and say, what are the characteristics that I think are important? That doesn't mean you have to go through every single line of code that your dependency is doing, but it's a good idea to take a look and say, have I created any typos? Am I downloading something that is closely sounds like another package, but I actually didn't get what I asked for? So those are tricky dependencies. And then pinning them as an important aspect to say, I want version 1.1.2. Why? Because that's the one that I've audited and I know I'm going to get it. That's going to get reproducibility and kind of determinism when you're rebuilding your application, your library, your Docker container. So that way you can kind of you have a known state. And you can audit all of these abilities in your code bases. But the pinning also helps for other things like GitHub Actions or other kind of Docker container images. You can say Docker pull and you'll get the latest. But if you are using a container that will like advance as they release new versions, say Postgres, right? I love Postgres, great database. But if I'm running Postgres 16 and I want to not auto upgrade to 17 without kind of intentionally saying so, if I don't pin my dependency on Postgres 16, I'm going to get 17 the minute it's released and available. And that can lead to some downsides and confusion and overall sadness.
Yep.
So pin them. Another thing you want to do is, as you're upgrading dependencies, you want to audit any warnings that are surfaced in your tests. Warnings are really great tools for software developers to communicate back to users of the behavior characteristic of this version is going to change in the future. So very commonly, a deprecation warning might be emitted saying the function you're using of this library is no longer going to be available in a future version. Here's a link. Here's the function name you should look at and look at to replace it. A really good example of warnings and kind of reading them is SQL Alchemy library. It's Python library to interact with databases, and every warning they emit has a URL to a web page that explains here's what to do next, which is super helpful to anybody who sees them. And then if you don't take action, if you just ignore the warnings, when you do update your dependencies, something's going to break, and then you'll have to hunt down, because after that deprecation warning has been emitted and the new version doesn't employ the, like, tell you the warning, because now that function's gone, you just have broken software.
Right.
So then you're starting to do analysis and root cause and what happened. But if you just listen to the warning when it surfaced, then, you know, you have a chance.
Yeah.
And then finally, on this one is update dependencies with some regularity, right? Very often it's like, you know, you're using, you know, again, let's use the Linux kernel. You're using Linux kernel version 5, and, you know, a CVE gets produced that says, hey, there's a security vulnerability in the Linux kernel from versions 5 all the way up to 6.2, right? So you're sitting there on 5 and you're like, whoa, now I have to upgrade to 6.2? I don't even know what's going to happen, right?
Right.
So if you had kind of rode the wave to upgrade to 6, the jump from 6.1 to 6.2 or 6.0 to 6.2 is going to be a smaller delta, right, and probably less painful. So the more often you do the updates and kind of audit your tests and your warnings, the easier it becomes. And it becomes part of natural patch management policy in your organization to say, you know, we do these when they're necessary. We do these when N amount of them stack up, or we do, you know, we only want to be 2 versions behind or 1 version behind, or whatever your policy is, but have a policy and do it with some regularity.
Yeah. Yeah. Does pip warn about like outdated stuff, or you know, potentially breaking changes in a newer version of things?
Yeah. So pip has can do a few things. There is a pip show me the outdated ones, right?
Right.
And that's very helpful. Dependabot will show you the outdated ones also, and it'll try and upgrade them. What pip doesn't do is show you breaking changes, because it can't, right? The breaking changes happen in Python when you run things. And so that's where, like, executing your test suite frequently will help exercise these code bases, and then watching the warnings will tell you what's wrong, right, and what to do next. Another kind of challenge is when you're looking at a dependency, there's no one way of doing versioning, because the versions in Python are just kind of a constructed string, and they don't have a meaning. Lots of people have adopted semantic versioning for their packages, but you don't have to kind of use that, and people implement semantic versioning slightly different, which is a different problem. But some packages use calendar versioning, where it's pretty much just the date it was published, right? And that gives you a sense of how long it's been since you got that project, but it has nothing to do with what breaking changes might be there.
Gotcha.
So there's no silver bullet here. It is one of those things where you kind of have to take a gander at the release notes. Dependabot will link to change logs and release notes if they're available for that project, which is very helpful. But it's just one of those things where you have to, you know, figure out your own upgrade policy based on the dependency that you have audited to say, how do they move forward?
Right. Yeah. I was just curious. This is kind of a neither here nor there comment, but I've used this tool called Platform IO, which is for interacting with like ESP32 boards and different types of like small electronics boards. Anyways, there's kind of a library management function in there where it can say you've got an outdated library and the newest one has a breaking change, like don't do it. You know. So I didn't remember seeing something like that in pip, and so I was just curious if that was another tool or something that I had missed. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. There's probably a tool that will do something like that, right? There was a cool idea surfaced a few years back around how to measure. This came off of an XKCD. It's called libyear, LIB year, where you take the current version of a given software package, you take the previous version, and you also calculate how long it's been since that package has been updated in your code base. So you can see how many lib years behind your project is across all of its dependencies. And, if you ran that across, hundreds of repos, you could say, all right, these are the repositories that deserve a little more attention right now because they're so far behind.
Right.
So it's another idea. And again, there's no silver bullet here. It is work. This is why we get paid money to do these things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I have yet to find or hear of anybody who has an AI that says, I will guarantee no breaking changes. So if you want to write an AI, good luck. I don't think that'll work. But sometimes you just have to write tests. You have to run the tests. You have to build the software and just have to see how it works.
Yeah. Using an AI might actually be introducing breaking changes. So, and, AIs are a little bit like dogs. Like they just want to please you, right? Like they're not going to tell you no.
No. I'm also a little impressed we got this far in without either of us saying AI. That's really cool.
Well, so, if Chris was here, we would have opened the show asking about AI. Because honestly, every time we have someone talk about AI on the show, there's a lot more attention because it's a very popular topic right now, right?
Yeah.
And while we didn't want to rotate fully into we're 100% AI now because there's still the entire technology community that's continues to do their stuff, right? Chris wanted to talk about what are we doing with AI this week, right? And I was going to talk about messing around with MCP, blah 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 blah. But so yeah, you got lucky. It took us 37 minutes.
Yeah. The good part is that I do have an AI warning story that as a software consumer, you should be aware of. My colleague at the PSF, security developer in residence, Seth Larson, has coined the phrase slop squatting, which is a kind of extension of typo squatting.
Yeah.
So typo squatting is where, if we're using SQL alchemy, somebody else might produce a similar package where they've replaced the L with the number 1, because on many keyboards, you won't notice the difference, or an uppercase I, right? Depending on the font, depending on the display, depending on how attentive you are being to this. On PyPI, we attempt to block many of these abuses, right? We try to block people from doing that. It's hard because there's millions of permutations, etc. But that's typo squatting. Slop squatting is when you ask ChatGPT for how do I write this Python code? It tells you about a package that does not exist. And because it's telling people about package names that don't exist, other attackers, malicious users out there are creating those packages with malicious behavior that will work based on what ChatGPT is saying and upload them to PyPI. You go and install it. It does what you asked it to, but it might carry along some extra behavior that you did not expect.
That's wild. I had never heard about that before. That's crazy. It's dedication to the game too. It's like, how can I rip people off in the smartest way possible? So I guess hats off to them, right?
I mean, wild. AI wants to please you. It wants you to do the thing, but it is not bound by laws of fact verification or truthiness.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Before we move on from consumers, I do want to do one last pro tip. So this is specific to the Python ecosystem. Most of the things that I spoke about are kind of generic to most software ecosystems. These are specific, and this is a feature that exists in pip, in UV pip, in poetry, to tell the installer, the tool that is installing your packages, to only install binary packages. The word binary here is a somewhat misnomer, but hey, this is where we are. Python packages are bundled up into what we call distributions, and we have two kinds. One is a source distribution, where you basically download a set of source code. Then Python has to package that up into a on-disk package and then put it in the right place. A binary distribution, or a wheel is another term for it, is where the same code has been packaged slightly differently and laid out slightly differently and a little more efficiently. The reason you want to prefer these only binary is because the source distributions historically have something called a setup.py file. And a setup.py file oftentimes is innocuous, and it tells the underlying kind of tool how to build this software, how to create that package, put it on disk. Historically, with many C dependencies or other compiled artifacts, that setup.py is instructions on how to compile software or move stuff around. So it's just an extra Python file. That Python file is executed during setup from a source distribution on your computer,
right,
or on your target machine, and could have some unintended effects. So asking pip or the other tools to only prefer a binary or a wheel distribution for your requirements says, I'd like to prefer a .wheel or a .whl file, which is the binary distribution, when I'm installing all of the files and dependencies that I want for my requirements. And it'll fail if there isn't one. So not every dependency out there has a binary distribution, but the ones I use and build PyPI with, which we have hundreds of them and are quite widely used across the ecosystem, they all have a binary distribution. So this helps mitigate one little more extra, potential security vulnerability in a supply chain attack, because the dependency that you installed last month that was fine and you've now upgraded might have have this other carrier behavior in their setup.py if somebody was able to sneak in and get it in the supply chain somehow.
Got it. I didn't know that was an option with pip. Thank you.
Yeah. But overall, be curious, right? Like, be curious about your dependencies, dig into them, see why you have them, who's running them, who's maintaining them. If you like them, if you use them a lot, if they make you lots of money, throw the maintainer some money, right? Like, that helps. Just kind of add them as a GitHub sponsor, a Patreon, or whatever, like they all could use a little bit of help for the thing that you got for free and is hopefully making your employer millions.
Absolutely.
Switching tack just a little bit. This is a shorter segment for software producers because most of our audience are not them. But if you are one, there are some things that I think you should do. You should do all the consumer stuff, right? But you should definitely set up a repeatable release workflow. So what does that mean? That means if you're using GitHub, use GitHub Actions to automate the release of your software, because the amount of folks out there who are still building and deploying stuff from their laptops is staggering and scary. And if you are a software producer, your laptop is a very juicy target for any attacker, because that's where the supply chain starts. If you're building it on your laptop and I can get onto your laptop and build it, you might not notice it and your consumers are going to get hit with something. But if I have the release workflow in a somewhat isolated environment, it is less likely to get kind of poked holes through. If you do use GitHub Actions, which I do, check out Zizmore, which is an audit tool for GitHub Actions. It's a security audit tool. It's relatively young, but it's pretty extensive. It's built by some folks who have deep knowledge of GitHub Actions and security, and they have been evolving it ever since its inception. You don't have to install the Python project if you're using Homebrew. You can brew install it. If you're using GitHub Actions, there's a GitHub Actions workflow. You don't even need to install it locally. There's probably a pre-commit config. It's just a really good tool to identify opportunities in your GitHub Actions workflows that could use a little tightening up, right? They'll suggest action version pinning that, like I mentioned around other dependencies. If you are producing software to PyPI specifically, use trusted publishing. This is a mechanism that we've developed over the last few years to remove the need for your CI system to have a stored credential. So very often you'll like create an API token and then store that API token somewhere. So that way you can do your repeatable release workflow. By using trusted publishing, we're leveraging the OpenID Connect protocol from GitHub Actions, GitLab, Google, ActiveState, and those are just the ones that we built or folks built for us. We didn't even build most of those. So if you've got a code hosting and action system that you want that can do OIDC, you could be a trusted publisher too. We've seen trusted publishing be picked up by Ruby Gems, and they've launched it because I don't know if Rust's Crates is using that yet, but the folks at npmjs.com have also expressed some interest in trusted publishing. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of have your machines talk to machines, and the token is scoped to only do the actions that are necessary from the target to from the source to the target. Doing it, setting it up is using a GitHub action. Like it's been made super easy for people to do the right thing. And then after trusted publishing, that's just getting it from the source to the target. Build attestations are another kind of way to have this other verifiable bit of here's where this came from, here's who built it, here's all these like metadata about the project. And you can see this most in Homebrew. If you brew install or brew upgrade, you'll see it's checking and verifying its own build attestations. So when Homebrew builds software to put in their bottles repository, they'll create those attestations and serve them themselves. Because PyPI is accepting software from all different producers around the world, we can ask them to build attestations and supply them.
Yep.
This is an example of Zizmore output as a workflow. So I just pulled this off of a PR that was open today, where it's basically saying the action is not pinned to a hash. So it's pinned to v@3, but Zizmore is kind of saying, you know what, you should pin this to a hash because that's using a tag, and they can move that tag every time they announce a new v3, and you'll get the latest version. So right. This is kind of just baked into our CI CD to just run Zizmore on every PR that touches any GitHub Actions and audit, and then produce the output onto GitHub. So it's like any other code scanning alert. So if you've ever used CodeQL, which is another good GitHub action code scanner, it'll show up. The links go to the docs. The docs are excellent. They tell you what to do. On PyPI, these are the attestations that I mentioned. So you can see kind of, here's a statement, and there's a SigStore transparency entry. SigStore is a whole other ecosystem, which is free to use, which they're kind of like an independent verifiability. So as the producer of software, when you build, you say, here's my attestation. Hey, SigStore, here's the transparency log for that. And that's the transparency entry from April 10th. It's got all these links to permalink to the repository, the branch, all of these things that are like verifiable. Mm-hmm. So there's not a ton of tools out there that are kind of building this in yet, but those are coming. You know, that's the beauty of this kind of evolution of supply chain security is it's evolving. So yeah. The aspects, like if you went to a file that has this and click through, you can see what SigStore transparent. It looks like these massive JSON documents with all these like cool hash maps and all these other kind of digests that make sure that it's all cryptographically secure. So if at any point anybody, like if the origin party, if the GitHub repo changes, or if that tag disappears, there's still this SigStore transparency entry that said this thing at that time was built with these promises, and you can verify that. So that's a useful tool in your toolbox to be aware of as a producer.
Yeah.
And don't trust anyone, right? Like the reason we have these verifiabilities is to reduce the need to have humans trust. But you should trust me, and you should trust Damien. We should trust our friends. But like, this is tongue in cheek. You should trust the folks who are deserving of said trust. To anybody who isn't, kind of trustworthy, limit their scope, limit the ability that they could use, to cause harm.
Mhm.
And that's all the slides I got. I dropped a couple links. You can find me. That's a picture of New York City, where if you look off into the left, you may be able to see the kind of the tippy top of my building that I'm speaking to you from right now. But I write a lot of words on the Python Package Index blog, as do some other great authors. And I dropped a link to my bio page that has many other links to fun stuff here.
Awesome.
But that's kind of what I put together. Hopefully this helps.
Yeah, no, this is great. I wasn't aware of Zizmore. Oh, hang on one second. There is a spam message. Good times. Hey, don't click on that, folks, if you're looking at the chat. That's not from us. You don't want to go there. It's coming from Twitch, and I don't have a way of deleting the spam thing in the chat. Anyways, yeah, this is great. I didn't know about Zizmore. I was not aware of kind of some of the. I was aware of GitHub attestations only because my friend Jessica Dean talks about GitHub Actions as her job for GitHub. So I was aware of that one day. She was just really nerding out about it, and I was like, "You're talking over my head, but this sounds cool." So I was aware of some of these things, but not all of it. So this has been great. This is very, very helpful.
Excellent.
Like, is there a number of bad actors that you block on an annual basis, or bad packages? I mean, are you able to share any of those stats?
Yeah, I tend to publish those on like my annual review, or kind of a notion of like what we're doing. So this past month, April, there were I think about 180 or so projects removed from PyPI as a result of kind of a malicious report. And the only reason that number is that high is not because I'm working really hard. It's because we have this really awesome community of security researchers who they will submit reports to PyPI when they find something fishy. And we've developed really good relationships with some of them, and they are super helpful, and they're around the world, and they're doing this again for free. So shout out to all the folks who are doing this. Some people are doing it as part of their job, but again, we appreciate it when it comes back to the open source world to help out everyone else. So thank you to all of y'all out there. But I'd say over the course of a year, it fluctuates, because sometimes we'll get like a mass rush campaign when somebody will try and like bum rush us with like a 500 in a day. But it's usually in that like under 200 mark per month. So that's about, 2,000 packages per year.
Wow.
Ballparking. Yeah.
Wow. That's if those people like planted a tree instead, I mean, just let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya together. But like, seriously, like there's so much like real human labor that's put into being terrible. It's wild.
Yeah. The annoying part is that like it is very much a cat and mouse game, right? Like the minute we figure out another way to kind of either slow down attackers or try and disincentivize them, they find another way. And it's like, or they're willing to pay for it. And it's like, if you are willing to pay somebody to like create registrations and upload files and do all this stuff, like, all right, you have more money than I do to just waste on stuff. Like,
I'm sure there's some sort of a business case there, like maybe all you need is just one ransom. Like maybe that's it. Like,
Yeah. I mean, the other kind of odd source is we get lots of just like information gathering or security research packages where somebody is like, "Hey, my company uses a project named XYZ. I wonder if I can get a package on Python on PyPI called XYZ and see if I can fool my own built systems to get it into there." And it's like, I understand what you're doing. I respect that. It is against our policy to allow that, so don't do
right,
it.
right.
Like we have some folks who are like, but I wrote in the README, do not use this. Like that does not matter. We don't care. This
Yeah,
is, it's hard enough for us to tell good from bad. So don't add things that look bad that you are saying are good.
right, right. That makes sense. That's also very creative. I wouldn't have thought of that. Um, I have a question from the audience. Do you have a YouTube channel or any place where you kind of talk about these things regularly, or is it mostly just in written form?
It's mostly written form or coming on shows like this. I have yet to have the desire to become a full-time video production person. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
But I'm happy to speak with people who are willing to do this. So, check me out on any podcast, on any vidcast. But I don't have my own, and I don't think the PSF has our own video channel yet.
yeah. That's quite all right. I understand. It is a lot of work. Genuinely is a lot of work. You know, like the amount of work that goes into producing this show, it's less polished, right? Like we stream live and then we do some post editing and then we repost it. That still takes hours a week, right? For my own like day job, my job is to create content, and a 5-minute video that is a recording of me going through a product or explaining an idea that can take 10-15 hours to produce, right? And it's because it's just me and I'm not that fast at it, and I'm getting better, but still, yeah, it's a lot of work. So I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like, what was it, like 25 years ago, I was doing a podcast before podcasts were cool.
Mhm.
And it was just a stream of consciousness, kind of like chatting with my pals and doing silly stuff. But like back then, it was a lot of work. And today, there's even more tools and more things to streamline. And it's still a lot of work. And it's like I've got other passions and hobbies that I want to do, but I will happily talk to anybody who is curious and wants to listen.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm very glad you came on the show. You're always welcome to return. So yeah, I would love it. This has been great. We started a little bit late, so we're a little bit over time, but that's all good. I think we're about done for this evening. Yeah. I
Sure.
don't see any other questions in the audience. All righty. Well, Mr. Mike, it's been fantastic. It's been nice meeting you. Thank you for taking the time out of your Wednesday evening to talk with me on the internet. So,
Thanks for having me, Damon. It's been a pleasure.
yes, sir. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.